Hey everyone, and welcome back to The Director's Cut, brought to you by the Directors Guild of America, where each episode we bring you a brand new interview with one of the film industry's top directors, conducted by one of their peers. Remember to subscribe to our podcast on Google Play Music, iTunes, Stitcher, or on our SoundCloud page at soundcloud.com/The Director's Cut. This episode takes us behind the scenes of director Peter Berg's film, Deepwater Horizon. Based on a true story, the film brings to life the harrowing occurrences that were set into motion on April 20th, 2010, when the Deepwater Horizon drilling rig exploded in the Gulf of Mexico, killing several crew members and unleashing the worst oil spill in U.S. history. In the aftermath of the explosion, the film follows the heroic efforts of the men and women on board the rig to save their co-workers and themselves. Following a recent screening of the film at the DGA Theater in Los Angeles, Mr. Berg spoke with director Nick Cassevetes about filming Deepwater Horizon. Listen on for highlights from their conversation, including what Mr. Berg learned at the oil school when researching for his film, the controlled chaos of his cinematography, and his passion for telling true stories. Enjoy.
How about that film, huh? I think that we all want to know why there wasn't a lot of action in the film.
I keep saying that I want to make a love story, like you do. And I just want a boy and a girl and a bottle of wine in the south of France. And I end up with this or, 200 guys shooting at each other. And, one day, if you help me, I would love to just do
just take a couple of zeros off the budget. You'll be fine. Listen, I don't know what everybody else felt. It's the first time I saw the film, and Pete and I are old friends. And I got to say, I really love the film. So that's the filter you're going to get from me. I really loved it. I really loved it. And I didn't expect to love it as much as I did. So why don't you start by telling us what attracted you to the material and how you got involved, and just give us kind of a general layout.
Well, thank you. First of all, thank you very much. I think what got me hooked was a 60 Minutes piece that I saw about Mike Williams, mainly focused on Mike Williams, the character Wahlberg played. And I, like everybody, had obviously heard about the rig blowing out, and I knew about the environmental disaster, the oil spill, and I knew how much trouble we were having, or they were having, capping that spill. And I remember CNN ran; they would have the oil just gushing in the corner of their screen 24/7, and it was like, constant anxiety. And I knew of that story, and then I saw the 60 Minutes piece, and it told a different story. It told a story about engineering and petroleum work, and these men and women who have these pretty incredible jobs and work in this place that I never really thought about and obviously never been. And I thought it was an extraordinary story that worked as a science study, about the engineering of oil rigs. I thought it worked as an interesting look at corporate greed and how big business can make bad choices based upon profit, which I think was clearly part of the behavior of BP and some other companies on that rig. And then it also just worked as a great adventure story and a survival tale. And kind of, as making movies, it ain't easy. And I think when we start out, it's like, shit, I'll make a movie about anything. I'll make a movie about your foot in that water bottle if somebody will give me money.
Not as good as this one. No.
Right? But at a certain point, you realize that it's, a year and a half, 2 years of your life. It's a tremendous amount of work, and you look for reasons. And those three elements all kind of added up, and I was like, yeah, I can get behind this.
Yeah, I mean, it was amazing. I mean, I found myself in the middle of the film going, yeah, this is what like an action film should be like. I mean, it was friggin' relentless. It was so spectacular that the thought occurred to me in the movie. I was like, I know that there was a concrete test and things were gone over from BP and, you know, an effort to make money. But is that the take? What's like when you make a movie, there's a lot of things like, and then this happens, and then this happens, and then this happens. What did you want the film's POV to be, or what did you want the audience to take away from the film?
I mean, there was, like, I never have one thing, and I always find that whatever I think an audience is going to take away, you know, it never is that. Like, how many times have you been cutting a movie and you think that you have a joke and you play it and nobody laughs?
Almost always.
Right?
Yeah.
And then suddenly some other random moment becomes, you know, very funny to an audience. And so I've given up on trying to think about, you know, what the singular takeaway will ever be. But, you know, one thing that really stuck with me, when I was doing the research for the movie was I met the families of the 11 men who were killed. And, you know, I visited with them, and when I met them, it was very, the pain that I, you know, could feel coming off of these families was extraordinary. And it was almost like a double shot, because they were dealing with the loss of their husband. These men were all fathers. These children were dealing with the loss of their fathers. Met the parents, you know, who were dealing with the loss of their son. And that, you know, is obviously very intense grief. And I felt that. But then I realized that there was almost like a compounded grief that all these families were going through. And that was this kind of secret shame they were living in, because when people heard that their son was killed or their father was killed on the rig, the attitude was, well, yeah, he caused that oil spill, so maybe he kind of got what he deserved, right?
Wow.
And when I realized that was this kind of shame and this secret that these families were living with, when in reality, those 11 men who died could have gotten off the rig. They could have just run and gotten in the lifeboats and gotten off. They actually, you know, not only didn't cause that spill, had absolutely nothing to do with that spill, but they died working at their stations trying to prevent the oil from spilling, trying to prevent that riser from snapping. And when I heard that pissed me off, you know, that got me going, that fired me up. And I think, you know, when I told those families, and Mark Wahlberg told me, because Mark was right there with me, that we wanted to, you know, and these were families who felt that the death of their loved one was completely overshadowed by the environmental issues, by the dead birds, and we told them that we wanted to make a film that, if anything, pushed back a little bit, and hopefully a lot of people go see it and think about, you know, the kind of human beings that worked on that rig, and certainly think twice before vilifying everyone who was a part of that.
Yeah, and in a great many sense, this film is about a film about 11 people who died, and you got to know them. I mean, it was laid out expertly. You take your time. I'm sure a lot of people have told you this on the film. I felt like I got to know the people. Let me ask you just a weird question, because this was something that I thought of. We'll get into some more technical stuff, but do you think if they hadn't cut corners, that this still would have happened, or this was like something that would inevitably happen on one of these things, or do you think it was just these people who were negligent?
I mean, you know, we went to oil school for about a month before the film started shooting, and we tried to learn as much about, you know, how these rigs work, and then started to get as deep as we could into what happened. And these are really smart guys, you know, these are like MIT dudes, and they speak a very complex language. And the more I would sit in these classrooms and learn about negative pressure tests and kill lines and blowout preventers and annulars and all kinds of crazy things, the more dense and confusing it became. And, you know, I watched the the congressional hearings, excuse me, on the blowout, and there was a very intense and exhaustive Coast Guard hearing. I watched all that, and my goal was to kind of reduce the science down to a level that I could understand.
Yeah.
Basically, there's a load of pressure and almost like a nuclear bomb under the Earth's core deep, and we go in there and stick up a straw in it and try and keep it from blowing out. That's the oversimplified version of it. But then it became a real sort of like quest for all of us to try and figure out, well, why did it happen? And, what went wrong? And to your question, was it fate? Was it preventable? And, we found that if you asked 40 different engineers why the Deepwater rig blew out, you would get more or less 40 different answers. But everything always came back to one thing, and that was this cement bond log. And everybody agreed that, I'm sure if there was is anybody here from BP right now? I'm always a little nervous, but I'm sure if there was someone here from BP, they would have something to say slightly contradictory to this, but pretty much everyone agrees that when you are ready to start pumping oil, that you've got to pour a tremendous amount of concrete. And it's so crazy, the technology, because you're going a mile down to the bottom of the ocean and then 2 or 3 miles into the Earth's core. And in the case of Deepwater, it was the deepest that we've ever gone into the center of the Earth. So if you don't want to get, biblical or anything, if there is a hell down there, we were knocking
don't mess around, yeah.
We were knocking on the door of it, right? And when you go down there, you pour tons of concrete, or cement as they call it, and that forms a protective barrier to help that oil from all blowing out. And before you can declare that cement properly poured, you have to do a test, and that test is the cement bond log, which you heard him talking about in the film. And basically, it's like sending sonar signals down into the deep, and you're like knocking, like to see if it sounds good, to see if the pour was solid. And that test cost about $200,000. And the BP executives, the company men on the rig, didn't want to pay that $200,000, so they sent them home, and they didn't do the test. And it's my thinking, and most of the creative team of the film, that they don't want to spend the $200,000, and they ended up spending $60.5 billion for that, save that $200,000. But it wasn't just they wanted to save the 200. It was they didn't want to know. If they had found out there was bad news or it wasn't a good pour, they would have had to rip it out and re-pour, and that would have gotten into tens of millions of dollars. So it's that line in the movie where Kurt Russell says, that reminds him of his daddy or his grandpa who would never go to the dentist, And I've done that. I don't know if anyone else, like if my tooth hurts, I'll just pretend that it's not hurting because I don't want to know. And, hopefully it'll just go away. And other times it's root canal. And, in the case of, so I believe if they had really checked the cement properly and not cut that corner, that's what led to.
Well, whether it was that or it was a lot of different factors, it was very effective in the film. You got it. You're like, oh, they're cutting corners. And by the way, as filmmakers, we both know what 43 days behind means.
Well, yeah. And that's, and that was the other thing. Like, I always felt that in some ways this movie sheds a certain positive light on BP, which we can relate to. BP is a company for profit. They're in the business of making money. If Nick and if we're on a film set and we're 40 days behind, we're done, and we're going to have guys like Malkovich come in and making our lives.
How wonderful was he, by the way?
Oh, he's the best.
You forget because he doesn't work.
Yeah.
How wonderful was he?
He's such a great guy, and to, it's interesting because to have Kurt Russell and John Malkovich working that we forget sometimes because young actors today and the days of social media and instant fame and everybody wants to be famous, the craft of acting does get sometimes lost. And I had never worked with actors as good as Malkovich and Kurt Russell, and particularly because they really loved their roles and they got it.
I think you're a little bit humble. I was thinking that too. Like, for a guy who makes a movie about shit that blows up, man, are you good with actors?
Yeah.
Actor can, I know from personal experience, an actor can only be as good as the environment and the amount of time you let, and the amount of believability you allow him to to generate, and it's a series of permission givings with actors that, it's okay, take your time, we're going to be here for that, because otherwise they get scared. They think their part's going to be, it's an action movie and they're just going to cut away and lose all the good stuff. But I mean, I got to tell you, man, if I was an actor, and believe me, I'm not, I have 40 films to prove it, I'd want to work with a guy like you, because it was real authentic. Let me ask you another question. What is this thing you have about working on true life stuff? Like you always are doing stories about like something that really happened. You don't want to make anything up. I mean,
and this goes back to kind of like, the reality of, we're not kids anymore. We're both fortunate to be able to make movies. And, I think every director at the end of the day, I'm sure there's many DGA card carrying members here. At the end of the day, you want to direct a movie, you're going to be getting up really early. You're going to be screaming all day long, frustrated, anxious, angry, confused, nervous, triumphant. You're going to run a schizophrenic array of emotions, and you're going to go to bed exhausted. You're probably going to develop multiple drinking problems. Your relationships are going to all fall apart.
And that's pre-production.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, it's just awful. It's an awful way to make a living in so many ways. That if you don't find, I don't mean that it's awful. That's not true. But it's hard. And for me, look, I know guys that they get up and they want Iron Man, and they want to direct Iron Man, and they want CG superheroes flying around, and that's what they want, and that's what gets them going. And, I applaud that if that's what gets them going. I found for me, and, I grew up, my dad was a big believer that nonfiction was the only legitimate form of literature, and he, read history books and was a war historian, and impressed upon me heavily the power of nonfiction and of real stories. And for me, when I did Friday Night Lights and I got to live with a high school football team and really meet those individuals and go deeply into that culture, and transcend the superficial, immediate presentation of, it's a football story, and realize that, no, this is life for these people. And I get to have those people with me, while I was working. And I did The Kingdom. There were FBI agents who had gone and investigated a brutal crime in Saudi Arabia. And I got to meet with those people, and Lone Survivor, to meet with the 19 family members of the SEALs who were killed, and have Marcus Luttrell, who I think you might have met with TR at some point, to have that power, that emotion of, the mothers whose sons were killed in Afghanistan, to be with those families. And in the case of this one, to meet with Mike Williams and meet with those family members, that just puts a pressure on me that fires me up and makes me want to get up earlier, makes me want to work a bit harder, and it
scream a bit more.
Well, I don't scream as much as I do, but maybe have nasty looks, like longer, lingering nasty looks if I'm mad, because it hurts my voice.
Well, we're lucky that you like that stuff. I think all of us are lucky. I mean, it was just a pleasure to watch this thing.
Thank you.
So, enough of all the nice stuff. Now let's get into let's just get into like,
you want the dirt?
No, I want to know how you did this damn thing. I do movies where two people sit around and talk about how they feel. How did you? I mean, okay, first of all, how did you pick your DP? Because he had a distinct style, a lot of handheld stuff, a lot of real tight stuff. And how did you meet this guy? Did they give him to you? Was he on the film?
Yeah, he was already on the film. Enrique was on the film, and he had a different style of working. I've told Nick this, but my inspiration is your father. He was one of the first filmmakers that spoke to me, and I don't know, when I saw, I think, Woman Under the Influence, I felt like I didn't know what I was watching. And I felt like there was a recklessness and a rawness, and a handheld quality, and that anything could happen at any time. And, I somehow that style of filmmaking, is what inspired me. And even if it's a big budget, film like this or on Lone Survivor or any of the films I've done, I shoot 99% of them handheld. We shoot 11:1 lenses usually so that the operators are, strong. Those are big zoom lenses. We improvise a tremendous amount. We don't cut. We go again and again and again.
You can see it, yeah.
The cameramen will make adjustments on the fly. They'll move. If an actor wants to go over there, Enrique will light for over there. Mm-hmm. If an actor wants to go over there in the same scene, Enrique might start screaming, but he'll run out and put lights out there. And
you shoot multi-camera or what?
Yeah, 3 cameras the whole time. And it's, it's when I was an actor on Chicago Hope, it was a really horrific experience.
You were wonderful, by the way.
Thank
You're
you.
wonderful on Chicago Hope, ladies and gentlemen.
The problem, see, when you do a TV show like Chicago Hope, we would have 26 different directors coming in, and there were 2. Oh boy, they almost exclusively would really frustrate me and annoy me because there were 2 types. There were the older directors who were, maybe a bit frustrated that they were doing a TV series because they were feature directors and they didn't want to be doing it. So they would come in and they would lay out these, for 4 hours, set up these techno shots with steady cams and cranes and this and that. And they, when we spend 4 hours, 5 hours lighting, and then as actors, we'd get 3 takes, and we'll be like, whoa. And it'd be like, they were determined to get back to feature glory. And they would drive us crazy. And then the worst were the film school students. You see, because there would always be like 1 or 2 SC or AFI students who and they would come in with storyboards and plans, and they were designing shots, and they would take 10 hours, and we would get 1 take. And we would just sit there and just like go crazy. And I kind of felt like, and then there was a few directors. There was a great director, Kenny Ortega. I don't know if you know Kenny, he was the one who would say, this is all bullshit, man. We should be having fun, and we shouldn't be so precious, and we should be looser, and we should just see what happens. And I love Kenny Ortega, and he was very inspirational. And there was another director, Bill D'Elia, whose son is Chris D'Elia, a really great stand-up comic. And Bill helped me a lot. And Bill had a much looser attitude about the whole thing, saying, this should be fun, and there should be accidents, and we should be able to make discoveries and not kind of preload everything. So that, if I'm the director and you're going to sit in that chair and you're going to say your 2 lines, you're going to get up and you're going to walk over there. And that's how it's going to be. You might have something to say, and I should listen. And so even in a film like this, we try, and Enrique was really great about kind of getting into my program. There's no dolly tracks, there's no cranes, there's no marks. It's a pretty wild process.
It's a cool thing about a camera. They both tilt and pan.
Yeah. Well, a handheld can go anywhere. But I have really good handheld operators who I know very well, and they kind of move around like attack fighter jets, and one will move and one will slide over and one will come in, and we tend to work quickly, and it's pretty it's controlled chaos.
I'm getting a 5-minute sign. I got to get a couple of these questions in because I want to know. I don't care if anybody else does. All right. What part of the rig is CG and what part is real? How did you do that shit?
Well, I generally don't like to tell people.
Yeah, you got to give. Well, come on,
these
are your colleagues.
You
come
guys
on.
like to know that stuff, huh?
Yeah, but give us a rough example because it all looks so good.
So we built a really big, giant piece of a rig in a parking lot of a Six Flags outside of New Orleans that was wiped out in Katrina, and we built. I think it's one of the biggest sets ever built. And when I got there, and they had already had plans to build it, and it was extraordinary.
You came in late?
I came in a little late. That's a whole nother story.
Creative differences and all
that. But they had a plan, and it was an interesting plan. And we had a massive set that was 6 stories high. And the first thing I thought about when I saw it is, well, okay, it's really cool, but I can see how this is going to go. We're going to get everybody up there, and 300 people, and we're going to be all ready to shoot, and we're going to have all these bombs and all this mud, and Mark Wahlberg's going to say, I got to take a piss. And that means you got to go down 6 stories, got to go to the bathroom, and he's going to get into his trailer, and it's 130 degrees in there, and and there's alligators, and he's going to take some of his clothes off, and he's going to get on the phone with his wife, and they're going to start talking, and it's going to be 2 hours every time someone has to go to the bathroom. So we kind of ripped some of that apart and built some of that on the ground. So we have one big piece of the set. We had 2 or 3 little pieces, and then we had ILM, and if you've ever worked with ILM, they're amazing, and so much of everything underwater was CG.
Yeah.
Those big fireballs, the problem with fire is that it's really hot.
Yeah.
And you can't.
Dangerous too.
Yeah. You can't light, your actors on fire, and you can't light your crew on fire. So we had a complex, balance of real stuff, that was on the big rig, real stuff that was on smaller rigs.
And how does that get presented to you? Do you go in there and say, now you're going to do this and you're going to do this and I want it to look like this? Or do they come and present that to you and you'd say, I like 2 better than 3?
So we do a lot of previs, for Mark Wahlberg jumping off that rig at the end, and Gina and Mark, that was a very complicated series of shots that required, 6 different locations and stuntmen and real actors.
Wow.
And water tanks and, decelerating rigs and cameramen being thrown off the rig with cameras. And you basically have a plan, and you pre-visit, which is an animated version of the shot, and then you sit and have these meetings that go on for hours, and
They're
it's
exciting, aren't they?
Oh my god,
yeah, they're really exciting.
Soul crushing. But it's like, okay, Nick, you're going to do this, and you're going to do this, and you're going to do this, and you're going to do this, right? And they're like, yep. And then it's all going to work, right? Yep. And then you see these pieces of it, and it just looks awful. And you go home, and that's when the drinking problem starts, and you swear at everyone, and you feel like it's never going to work, and it looks horrible.
How was the first cut? How did the first
horrible,
pass?
Horrible, like suicidal. You throw up, and it makes no sense, and you want to kill, especially the ILM folks. Is there anybody here from ILM?
Like, just walk.
Well, I mean, ILM is like, they're so talented, but they're like, they speak a language that, and they might as well be speaking Mandarin Chinese. Everything costs $42,000, no matter what. So it's like, can we add a little smoke? Yeah, it'd be $42,000. Can we blow up the whole rig? Yeah, it'd be $42,000. Can we, take Mark Wahlberg and turn him into a dragon? Yeah, sure, that's $42,000. And they just look at you, and they're very, very condescending in a loving way. And I love ILM.
Condescending in a loving
but
way,
they're
by
just,
the way. That's a
they
good
know
question.
they're so much smarter than you, And I'm like, I remember at one point I got in a fight with one. I go, listen, I made a decision to choose a career where I did not have to be intelligent, and you're disrespecting my choice, right? But somehow, and they're the best. It all comes together, and it always costs a lot more than $42,000, but it does come together. And I remember the first screening that they were ready to say, okay, this is, we're presenting you what we think is, a close approximation to what, and we sat there, and my editor, Colby Parker, and we were just blown away, that the effects here, I think, are really good. And it becomes this marrying of 5 or 6 different departments that you have to referee, as a director. But fundamentally, you just have to, have faith that you've hired people that really get it and know what they're doing.
Look great. A lot of people slamming into stuff. Does it seem weird to you, like that the best special effects are in like Jurassic Park for like 98 years ago? I mean, I liked it. The movie seemed really mechanical and in camera. I just say one thing. I met this guy a long time ago, right before you were about to direct your first film, the one a long time ago. He asked
Very bad things.
Yeah, very bad things. He asked me to do something, and I was busy, and I regretted that. But it really is great to see. Like, a lot of people go to see actors work. Hey, Denzel's in this movie. I'm going to go see it. I do that too. But I also like to see progression of filmmakers, and it's a really mature film, and really good to see you grow as a filmmaker like this. A really a big accomplishment. So it was a real treat for me to be able to look at the film and see it with like 150 of my best friends. Really, congratulations! A great film. Yeah. We don't want to talk anymore. All right. 1 minute. All right, go ahead, Pete. Anything else? What else do you want to say about the film?
I don't know. I'll take a couple of questions if anyone has a question. Yeah. Well, the little girl, you're talking about the Coke can and all that stuff? Yeah. That really came from the science is so complex. I mean, it really is. Like, we sat with 10 petroleum engineers, and they sat me down, and you talk about painful, and they started explaining to me how these rigs work. I mean, I'm reasonably intelligent. I did okay in college. I fancy myself as someone that can, basically take a complex and say, like, just, explain it to me like I'm, 15 years old. And I found that didn't work. They'd been explaining it to me like I was 15. I couldn't understand any of it. So finally I was like, explain it to me like I'm a 9-year-old girl. And they were like, okay. And and I really felt that, I wanted the audience to have enough of an understanding. I want you guys to be able to say, okay, I might not understand exactly what these people are talking about, but I get it. I get that Kurt Russell and John Malkovich are disagreeing about the results of a test. I might not know. So, but I understand that the consequences of that are serious. And I felt that, we came up with that whole scene late, right before we started shooting. I really just was like, we need to have a little kid explain to us in fairly, pedestrian language how this thing works. And then I felt if I then was able to, then literally land the audience on that rig and let the conversation start getting more technical, you might not totally get it, but you'd get enough. And I also believe that it's like, audiences, you want to be smart. People nobody walks around going, yeah, I'm stupid. I'm just a dumbass. I can't understand nothing. You want to understand. So you're trying to understand the science. And it was a challenge to figure out, how much we could ask an audience to accept versus how much we felt we had to explain. Because there really is some dense science. Well, I mean, the whole thing. I mean, because there were so many different parts of it, look, some of the big wide shots, the fireballs, that's literally all ILM. I mean, we talk about, give me a wide shot of the rig exploding and make it really, really hard, really, in today's world of explosions, you want to capture someone with a fireball, you've got to earn that. So that would just be sending that up to San Francisco and waiting for it. But, the details of the action and the challenge with this kind of action as a director is if you get so caught up in the scope and just think that people running around and screaming and fireballs and things breaking you is going to get it done, you're going to, I think, be emotionally shortchanging an audience. So trying to keep those characters and make specific goals, literally we got to get this guy's leg out of this stuck piece of steel and turn that into an event in a sequence. It took a fair amount of time, but, I really like filming that kind of action, character-based action. And so, we attack it aggressively. We shot the whole film in, I think, 60 days, which is quick. So we work fast. I don't really like to be on film sets, so I like to get in and get out as quick as I can. Okay, like 2 more. Yeah. That was like, I'm not kidding when I say, John Cassevetes is my favorite director, and he would improvise, I believe, quite a bit. Or if he didn't, it felt like he did. And I love improvisation, and there was a scene where Malkovich goes and visits with Wahlberg, and they talk about noodling for catfish. We made that scene up at lunch and shot it right afterwards, just made it up. I like to stand very close to it and throw ideas out. And, I told one of those actors to start singing Money. I thought that was an interesting way without being too on the nose and talking about, obviously there was a lot of greed that was driving that ship and in Friday Night Lights, we're pretty public about it. We love our writers. We respect our writers. We shoot the script, but we also improvise, as much as we can. Yeah, I think, I love Backdraft and I love Kurt Russell in that film. And that's when I was still acting and I wanted to play Billy Baldwin's role. And I was pissed off that he got that part. Really wanted that part. Yeah, I think, I looked at Backdraft which was so cutting edge, at the time it was made. And, but they were limited. They didn't have the ILM wasn't capable of working with fire the way they are now. And so if you watch it, the fire, they would have to, put a fire pot over here and a fire pot over there and kind of move around it because they couldn't bring that CG element. They couldn't bring burning embers and debris and heat vectors and all that kind of stuff that we benefited from. I don't know when Backdraft was 20 years ago, right? Something like that. The ILM has just progressed, and that's where having a great effects team can say, okay, well, Backdraft did a lot of stuff great, but we can now take it further and try and make it feel like it's a more of an immersive experience. So thank you to this great gentleman for doing this on a Saturday.
Man, great film. Great film. Thanks for coming out, guys.
Thank you guys for coming out, too.
Thanks for listening to this DGA Q&A. You can watch more discussions like this on our website or our YouTube channel. Also on our website, you can explore our visual history program with long-form oral history interviews that delve deep into the careers of veteran DGA members. Check out the program at dga.org/craft/visual history. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to The Director's Cut on iTunes, Google Play Music, Stitcher, or our SoundCloud page so you won't miss an episode. And if you're enjoying the podcast, please leave us a review. We'd love to hear your feedback. Thanks for listening and have a great week. This podcast is produced by the Directors Guild of America. Music is by Dan Wally.